super excited to have somebody that can really speak to a lot of the stuff that went on with this game and the soundtracks and a number of things to do with Tony Hawk. Ralph D'Amato. Welcome, Ralph.
Hey, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And for people that don't know, Ralph was in various roles on Tony Hawk games all the way up to, I believe, Project 8.
Yep.
Were you involved at all in the music process? And I was always just curious, like, how the selection process went, because I think one of the significant things to me that, I mean, there was certainly licensed music used in video games before. Tony Hawk predates, what Rockstar started to do with the Grand Theft Auto soundtracks. And I think that Rockstar definitely took note of that. They even had their own skating game that I believe came out the same week as Tony Hawk, which was Thrasher, that, obviously didn't do as well. But I think they took note of that. And the thing that felt different to me than just like, I don't know, Madden football just calling like, hey, Sony Music, what do you want us to promote? Or, It seemed like it was actually selected by people that wanted it to have music that wasn't necessarily picked for its commercial or promotional value, but sort of like it fit a certain culture. So you could talk about that process a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And it ended up being a group of us that were on the development team that were also passionate about music, that we were the music or the soundtrack team. And again, it was around 5 or 6 of us. I was the producer that kind of would manage the picks that we would make. And, again, mind you, this is way pre Spotify or pre being able to go on YouTube and just find, any single music track you want to find. So we were ripping our CDs and sitting around and listening to MP3s and just kind of making picks of what we thought would fit, playing the game alongside of listening, these sort of listening parties that we had in our music meetings. And then just really making a pick of the tracks we thought we liked, that we thought would appeal to the audience. And it was made by, people that were passionate about music. Everyone on the music team they were all really passionate about the kind of style of music that they enjoyed, myself included. So we all had our favorites, but then it really came down to the almighty budget, how much you could spend on a particular soundtrack for a particular game. And that increased over time. The last game that I worked on, which was Project 8, was about $500,000 for our soundtrack budget, but we had, I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say somewhere in the high 70s, low 80s as far as music genre, or as far as tracks. So we were appealing to a lot of different genres after that point. But the soundtracks were definitely picked by people that were passionate about specific genres of music on the team.
I think it definitely, for a lot of people, kind of exposed them to maybe things that they hadn't heard. I'm curious, maybe Blake and also Jason, just, kind of coming up and growing up with these games. Like, could you talk a little bit about, were they sort of influential and maybe opening you guys up to new things or exposing you to things that you hadn't heard before?
Tony Hawk's Underground specifically, it feels like crazy to say, but like changed my life. And it, in a lot of ways, comes down to that game's soundtrack. Because I was like, I want to say 9 when I played that game. And Jesus. Being a kid...
That can't be true.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was 29 when I played that game.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd never heard music before. But I played that game, and like being a kid in suburban Kentucky, like I was introduced to bands that like made such a profound impact on my life. Like my favorite band of all time is Alkaline Trio, and Armageddon is in Tony Hawk's Underground. That's the first place I heard it. And hearing New Noise by Refused, and then growing up and learning about The Shape of Punk to Come, that was huge, and hearing something like The World Is Yours from Illmatic or Impetus by Clutch off the Impetus EP, like, when you're 9 years old in Kentucky, that stuff is not what you're hearing every day. So for being a kid, like, that opened my eyes to punk, rap, hardcore, metalcore, like all stoner metal, southern rock, all this stuff. I can't understate what that game, I mean the series in general, but that game specifically like meant to my tastes and like what I was interested in growing up.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point too, is that, it definitely had a punk focus, but to me, I think one of the cool things about, I just think Southern California culture in general is it's always such a melting pot. You know what I mean? Even going back to the days, the 80s, you had hardcore, but then you had, stuff like NWA that was coming up, and then bands like, Faith No More, Jane's Addiction, and bands that were kind of merging different styles. Some bands that were like, Chili Peppers and Faith No More that were starting to take like, hip hop cues and things like that. So it was always kind of, and thrash, a lot of hard, Suicidal, DRI, and the bands that were kind of merging like thrash metal and punk. And so I think that's a great thing about these soundtracks, is they reflect something that I've always kind of admired about Southern California, because I think there's just a lot of people, a lot of different groups that mix in like LA, and I think that's reflected.
That actually, that made it somewhat, for the soundtrack picking, that as the influence grew and grew, it made it a little bit more difficult for us, because we had to appeal to a lot more. We couldn't just put a bunch of ska, SoCal ska punk bands on the soundtrack. It had to keep on growing and growing until, you had a bunch of different music genres that were represented. And as the game grew and grew, and these soundtracks just became pretty huge just on of themselves. And the licensing process, once we made the picks, it went back over to Activision, and we worked with Activision music supervisors over there. Generally, a guy named Tim Riley, who would work with all the different licensees and try to get this stuff done, which it was, even, just because we picked things didn't mean it was going to happen. It was still a long road after it went down on the music sheet, and from that point for it to get in the game, for sure.
Yeah. And I think it did. I'm actually looking at the Thug soundtrack right now on my phone. It's like, it's an amazing mix.
Yeah,
you have a lot of bands that like Mastodon, before they were really, like a super popular metal band. And I even noticed you have a band called the Midnight Evils, which were from Minneapolis. And I don't think they ever played clubs more than like 200 people or something.
Yeah,
so
that was part of the idea of, if we got bands that would send us, or I know Mastodon was a character artist, Nolan Nelson. He was a big Mastodon fan, and that he was part of the music group, and that was his pick. And the other one might be as well. But if we got songs from, or CDs from bands, just random independent bands, and we could do gratis licenses, it was sort of a no-brainer. If it fit, we liked it, and it was free, it just kind of fattened up our music library. I put one of our tracks in Thug 2, and we had a couple other people that had bands in the office, and we stuck their tracks in. So we would try to fatten it up as much as we could.
What was your band?
Dead End Road, Sin City, and Thug 2.
Okay, wow.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. So, that was just like one of those, my band had this, we're just kind of, and we still play today, although we don't play right now. We haven't played for a while, but we still get a decent hits on Spotify, just because we're kind of wrapped up in the whole music, and all the playlists that come through Spotify. We get 20,000, 30,000 plays a month because of it. It's kind of crazy for a no-name Southern California. Now we're a cover band. We play covers at bars and so forth. But we threw one of our tracks in, and it was always cool to get indie bands that threw us really cool tracks that fit, and it beefed up our soundtrack. And there are tracks that we wanted. I always envisioned Sabotage by the Beastie Boys being a great intro track for a Tony Hawk video game.
Yeah, totally.
And I just we were never able to. We actually, eventually they did get a Beastie Boys track. I think it was in Proving Grounds, I believe. They had a Beastie Boys track, but while I was working on the soundtrack, we couldn't get the deals done with the Beasties. They weren't really down with licensing music for video games at that time.
MinMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The Deepest Dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.